Where do I come from? 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 Where? Where do I come from? Where? I am Duncan the Cow! I'm the God!
Hi, I'm Eamon.
I'm Kyle.
And this is Keith, and welcome to the Highlander Rewatched podcast, the podcast where we watch the entirety of the Highlander television series. And yeah, everyone around this table has grown up loving Highlander, so we're all huge fans of it, but we all realize, I guess, that this first season is, I don't know, it can be a little wonky at times, so we're going to be critical of Highlander as much as we love it as well. This episode is entitled Family Tree and was originally aired Saturday, October 10th, 1992. It was directed by Jorge Montesi. He directed a couple episodes of Highlander, plus a ton of other TV stuff. And more interestingly, it was written by Kevin Droney. He's written a couple Highlander episodes too. But other things he's written, he wrote Mortal Kombat.
The movie?
The movie.
With Christopher Lambert.
With Christopher Lambert. So I guess there's
Raiden.
Worlds Collide as Raiden.
Which I think may have been the tagline for Mortal Kombat too, but...
Worlds Collide?
Well, maybe for Annihilation, but...
And then guest stars in this episode are J.E. Freeman as Joe Scanlon. He was in David Lynch's Wild at Heart and Miller's Crossing.
Yeah, Miller's Crossing.
He's like-
Eddie Dane. He's amazing in Miller's Crossing. Phenomenal.
Awesome.
Is he equally good in this episode, in your opinion?
No. I think he is operating at a high level in this episode.
Yeah.
though. I think he does a good job.
And then Peter DeLuise is also in this episode. And if you're a sci-fi or fantasy fan or comedy fan, you would know him because he's Dom DeLuise's kid.
Whoa.
But he came into his own. He was one of the producers and writers and even acted on a lot of Stargate SG-1, Stargate Atlantis, all that sort of stuff.
Who does he play?
He plays a couple different parts. I think he's kind of one of those background characters, but I think the biggest one he plays was the star of the spin-off TV show Wormhole Extreme.
Wow.
I think is
Oh,
Peter
yeah, that's
DeLuise. Or is that his? Or is there another brother? I don't know. I don't remember off the top of my head. But he's really funny, and he's one of the guest stars in this. So according to the IMDb episode description of this episode, Duncan bails Richie out of jail after he was caught stealing files from an adoption agency in an effort to find out who his parents are. From what Richie read in the files before he was caught, he and Duncan are able to find a man who claims to be his father. Duncan senses that something isn't right, so he hits the street to find out who this man really is. So yeah, Kyle, do you want to start us off with how this episode kind of opens?
Right, so Richie is at, I guess it's an adoption agency, which is not clear at first. Like, I thought it was a doctor's office.
Yeah.
So he's pretending to be some kind of courier,
Right.
So he can get his hands on his own adoption file, I guess, so he can figure out where does he come from. And he, of course, gets caught and runs away with the file. Mm-hmm. He gets caught by this security guard, which first, this adoption agency has a security guard. Yep. So I don't know if this comes up often, but the security guard, when he catches him, calls him lightning lips. like it's a totally normal thing to say.
The other thing about the security guard altercation is, like, Richie's running down the steps. The security guard gets him. He slams Richie against the wall with such force that there are 2 dents in the wall. Like, he slams him against the wall. It's it wasn't a stunt. I'm like, they're just 2 huge, breaks in the wall.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Which, again, this grown-ass man does this to a guy who we're supposed to believe is 17.
Yeah.
Does this to a child.
This is brutality. This is a minor who's getting slammed up against the wall for stealing a file. And the security guard also knows exactly what he stole. Like, he's like up to date. Oh, you got that file or something? I'm like,
So we also find out at this point, we cut to like the interior of like it's a jazz club / like underground casino.
Yeah.
So we that's where we meet our guest star for the episode, Joe, who's like a card dealer. And we find out that it turns out he's kind of scammed the casino. Like, he helped somebody steal some money by like playing the card or the deck in their favor. So he owes this casino $50,000, and they give him an ultimatum, 5 days to get it back.
Right.
And they break one of his fingers. I guess the implication is they're going to break one of his fingers every day.
Yeah.
Until he pays them back.
This Clinch guy breaks one of his fingers. this guy is Clinch the DeLuise?
Yeah, Clinch is.
This guy, I don't know where to start with this guy. So he's like, he's dressed like business casual. He's dressed like in a white T-shirt with khakis.
I have written down that he kind of looks like a criminal if he was like part of the rich kid frat.
Yeah,
At like a college. Like,
Yeah, like he's like the guy in the frat who like knows how to score you coke or something like
Yeah.
that. Like
Yeah.
he's got like some shady ties, but looks very non-threatening.
Yeah, I'm gonna go out on a limb and say this is the least threatening man that has ever lived. And it's like,
but then he starts like breaking fingers and
Yeah.
he knows karate.
Yeah. Yep.
because why not?
yep.
so Duncan ends up bailing Richie out of jail. As usual, Duncan has to help Richie. And Richie kind of relates his experiences in the orphanages. And it's an amazing exchange with Duncan, I think. And it's so 90s.
Why the orphanage? That was the question, right?
Right.
Return to the old stomping ground. I spent a year or so there when I was like 5. Then I did this whole foster home drill. Hi, kids. This is your new foster brother, Richie. Treat him just like one of the family. Not.
Amazing.
That's spectacular.
Yeah, so Richie is trying to find out some clues about his past. And then we end up having a flashback. Well, we find out that Richie catches a glimpse in this file that he sees that before he knows his mother has died, but he sees that his father.
But he's not sure it's even his mother. Like,
Yeah,
really?
he's
Well, he
not
thinks
really
it's
sure
his
of all
mother.
the
He sees
facts.
the name Emily Ryan,
Okay,
so he sees the last name because he's Richie Ryan.
right.
Right.
So is able to go from there. Which, just to pause before we move too far on from this. This is episode number 2.
correct.
And I don't know what happens off camera, but I guess we're supposed to believe that like Duncan adopted Richie or something.
Yeah.
He like takes him in like as his ward.
for some reason.
So he's like the Dick Grayson of this thing,
Mm-hmm.
and not unlike Batman, Duncan inexplicably tells him everything.
Right.
Well, I guess he's kind of seen everything at this point.
Yeah. Well, like, Richie kind of does remind me of Robin in Batman Forever. Now that you mention it, like, he has the leather coat. He's kind of like a bad boy, but
Rides a
he's kind of
motorcycle.
cool. They're very similar characters. What's the actor's name?
Chris O'Donnell?
Chris O'Donnell. Yeah,
Yeah,
has
he-
like
he
kind
does
of an
have a similar
O'Donnell
attitude.
thing going on.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So Richie catches this glimpse. He thinks his father was still married to his mother when she died. So he's like, I got to find my father if he's still out there. So then we get a flashback, which is great, to 1622. Also, if you're wondering where we're getting these dates from, because they don't specify the dates in the episodes, because I'm a nerd, I have the Watcher Chronicles on interactive CD-ROM.
That's amazing.
And it's got it's like basically the show Bible, and the show creators and writers kind of mapped everything out as they were going, when people died, when the flashbacks were, so that way things wouldn't get kind of crossed around. So that's when this scene takes place, 1622. And I guess the theme of this episode is kind of where you come from. And so Duncan is remembering the first time he died. And so this sets up another rule, I guess, kind of, about immortals. Immortals don't know they're immortal until they die.
Right.
Like, he's not born with the knowledge that he's immortal or what the rules are or anything like that. And it's explained in the first episode that, like, Connor was his mentor and had to, like, take him under his wing and teach him, like, the way of
right.
this
Teach
whole
him
game.
the rules.
Right. So that you die and then you're frozen in time at that age.
At that age.
From then on.
Correct. So Duncan dies in battle, with his father. Or his father doesn't die, but he's in battle with his father. Duncan dies, and he ends up waking up the next day, and everyone thinks it's the work of the devil. And
Here's my question about this.
uh-huh.
So they're both from the clan MacLeod. I'm fairly certain in the first episode, Duncan mentions knowledge of Connor being an immortal and like that he was a legend or something.
Yeah, they said there was like an old
remembering
tale.
that right? Yeah. So like, why are they completely unprepared and like is Connor also exiled? That's what I'm not sure about.
Connor is exiled as well. Like, they have a pretty similar origin story. So I guess
Okay.
maybe that's the idea. Like, this has happened before. It was the devil before. It's the devil
Okay.
again.
Yeah, but they
Sure.
like don't mention it. Like, you'd think if there was precedent for this, they would have been like, "Wait a minute."
Oh well, Connor had this too, right? Yeah, you know.
So we cut back to the present.
Before we move,
Okay.
Before we move on, so like, I feel like Adrian Paul made a choice that because he's younger, his voice has to be higher.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think that was a choice he made. But if you're frozen in time and you stop aging from the point at which you die, his voice should have the same
Yeah, the same quality.
quality then as it did now. It shouldn't have actually been higher. Because if your voice keeps getting deeper as you age, even though your body's still the same, like all immortals should have like low, gravelly voices.
The other thing I wasn't sure about is Adrian Paul doing his Scottish accent.
Yeah, he
first-
lays on the Scottish accent real thick.
It's very prominent. The first time I heard it, I thought he was dubbed over.
So Duncan in the present is telling Richie about the first time he dies, and he kind of says, I've forgiven my father for like banishing me. Like, they were primitive people, they didn't know any better. So like Duncan has kind of moved past that part of his life, because Richie's like still really upset. Like, well, why didn't my father care for me or any of this stuff? And it's like, well, you could forgive him. Who knows what? Just a cool theme in the episode, I guess.
Yeah.
So Richie talks about how he remembers his mother dying, which is he just has flashes. It was in a candy store with
Mr. Stubbs.
or Mr. Tubby.
Tubbs. Oh, yeah.
Tubby, because he couldn't say his name right. He would always get licorice. And all he remembers is his like his
The most implausible thing about the episode, what small child wants licorice?
That's especially if it was black licorice.
Yeah. So I guess, I don't know, Richie remembers this candy store was near the post office where the mother would get a check every week. And she dies, and that's kind of all he really remembers.
I was really confused by this story, by the way.
It's an
I
odd-
was like,
odd story.
What is going? One quote he said in the story is, he said, "I was 4 going on 5." That just was an interesting quote that I wanted to share from that story.
So Richie is determined to find this candy store because maybe the owner has answers. So he goes on this montage.
Oh my
trip.
God,
The
this
introduction
montage.
to the the montage is awesome. The way they get there is fantastic because it's like another one of those things where like internet really changes things.
Oh, sure.
Because Duncan has this like shit-eating grin when he figures out like check the phone book. like the plan is like the store's closed, but they knew it was near a post office, so check the phone book for post offices and ask around. And Duncan looks so pleased with himself.
Then when he's searching, it's how long do you think this montage is? A minute?
At least.
It's
a lot of
at least
episode
a
time.
minute of him just talking to 40,000 people and pointing. Talking and pointing, talking and pointing, talking and pointing.
So the way this worked was they didn't have a budget to hire a crew of actors that he could actually ask questions to. So Richie, Stan Kirsch, they just took a camera guy and Stan around Vancouver, which also, news alert, this show is shot in Vancouver, which is not made clear at all what city this is.
Yeah,
in the
they
first
never
episode,
say what city they're in, right?
No, well, we'll get to that later, maybe.
But they're always mentioning, you can't do that in this town,
Yeah.
in this part of town.
In the first episode, I always just assumed it was New York because that's where the first movie took place.
Right.
Connor was there. I figured it was New York. It's definitely not.
Yeah.
It's Vancouver. So they take a camera guy and Stan Kirsch. They walk around Vancouver.
That's pretty cool.
And Stan was asking rando people on the street, where's the nearest McDonald's? And they were giving him directions. And then I also, this was interesting. So the song, it's really cheesy. It's the song Deliver Me by Sonia Dada, which was a early 90s band. However, their album dropped like a week before this episode aired.
Wow.
So I feel like probably behind the scenes, their producers or the record execs were like, use this track in your hot new show. So there's a little cross promotion there.
Are they on iTunes? Can we download their album?
I bet they are.
Hit them up, guys.
Yeah, if Sonia Dada's out there,
Yeah.
we'd love to hear from you guys.
Yeah.
So anyway, Richie eventually finds Stubbs, who's like at an old folks' home or something.
He's like playing chess, but he got directions to find him. They gave him directions to find this guy playing chess in like some park or something.
Right.
Right.
So we find out that he's now sold the store or whatever.
He sold it 2 months ago.
Right.
So I'm like, was this place really that hard to find if it was like in business 2 months ago?
Yeah, because the whole reason it was supposed to be hard was because, like, it must have been closed long ago. It's like,
Right.
you know what? It probably was still in that phone book.
Yeah. But yeah, so
And now it's a games workshop.
that's right. Where the bunch of weirdos hanging around playing games.
Yeah, which also, like, I guess we don't exactly know what the Highlander target audience is.
true.
But I'm willing to bet there's, like, a solid,
Some
like,
crossover,
20%
yeah.
nerd quotient who they just teased.
Yeah, absolutely. He talks to Stubbs, Tubby, and he's like, "Oh, you're looking for Jack Ryan," and I don't know.
I remember you, licorice,
Licorice, right?
I'm like, are you kidding me? How many people came into your store to buy licorice?
Maybe 0, and that's why.
Oh, because he's the one kid that liked licorice.
Yeah, maybe
We
it's all
figured
come
this
together.
out. Yeah, that's good.
They eventually, he's using this information, he is able to find Jack Ryan.
Right.
Like,
He's living in like some seedy hotel.
Yeah.
Oh.
So, like, he knocks on the door and pretends he has no idea.
Well,
What they're talking
something
about.
something leads him to that apartment building, right?
Well, it's the information he gets from Tubby.
right.
Yeah.
Takes him to there, and the guy, like, says, "Oh,
Yeah, this
I'll
is-
tell him. I'll let him know."
This is Joe from earlier, the thief who gets his
Right.
finger broken.
Right. So that's a fair point. We don't actually know whether or not this
He's
is
really
Jack-
his dad or not.
Whether he's
Yeah.
really Jack Ryan or not.
Right.
But then this guy, then he gets another visit from wavy-haired
Peter DeLuise.
Peter
From
DeLuise,
Clinch.
whose hair game is on point.
Oh, and he greets him. So he knocks on the door. Joe opens it, and Peter DeLuise just grabs his face and shoves him
Throws
across
in
the room.
Yeah. And he's like, he says, listen, he's threatening him. He says, oh, I read a book on anatomy, so I know every twist and turn. I know what to pinch. I know what to pull. I know what pops. I'm like, what book of anatomy did you read where it's like teaching you every single way to torture someone?
So then he's like threatening to break his like finger again, and then he threatens him with this line. He's like, "I'm gonna cut off your hand and make you eat it with a side of ketchup."
Yeah, he's like finger by finger with a side of ketchup. But he says this because there's a plate on the ground in the middle of the floor for some reason.
Like a
When he-
dirty paper
Yeah,
plate.
and when he came into the room, that's the first thing I noticed. I was like,
it's
why
really
is there
prominent.
that plate in the middle? There was a table in the room. I'm like, but yeah, Clinch is pretty great. He was a highlight, I think, of this episode.
Yeah.
very
So
entertaining.
eventually, I guess after this, he's threatened like Joe doesn't know how to get this money that he owes them. So he then tracks down Richie and shows up at the antique shop, and he's like, "Hey, like I was scared to tell you who I was before, but like I'm your dad." Like, and then he starts regaling him with like family stories about like all his uncles who are all criminals. He's
Yep.
like, "Oh, I remember this guy. He would sell hot dogs at the ballpark.
And he'd stuff the money
And
in
he'd
the hot
stuff the
dog
money in
bun.
the hot dogs." And Richie's like totally like, "Oh wow, like my family's great." Like he's really like bought into this.
Yep.
He's like a little junior grifter.
Sure,
You know?
Yeah.
he like feels some kinship or whatever.
Yeah. At this point, I felt like the episode did veer off a little track. Like I really liked the parallel they were drawing with Richie and Duncan, kind of looking for their.
Yeah, that's compelling.
Yeah,
It's
that's
compelling,
good.
but we don't get any more flashbacks for a while in this
Yeah.
episode. Like it kind of, I think, veers off and is just kind of Richie focused. I wish it was a little more integrated.
Yeah, like the one ingredient of that, I really feel like missing. Because the other flashback we get was what our intro was, with him, trying to figure out where he comes from. There's no moment where they show him making peace with it. He just says, I made peace with it, and you're just like, accept it. But I feel like there was an opportunity there for like, something could have happened.
Duncan decided to make peace, yeah.
Yeah, or, you reveal something about what led him to that point. And I feel like that was the ingredient that like could have tied it together.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, Joe / Jack and Richie start hanging out more. They're getting to know each other. So they end up having like a really heartfelt discussion, like in an alley, or I don't even know where the hell they are.
They're just like wandering.
They're just wandering around. And so let's take a listen to this clip. I think it's absolutely ridiculous. It's, again, super melodramatic, which this show excels at.
Yeah.
Here we go.
But at the time, I thought I was a guy with ambition. I thought I saw a chance. It was sitting up on a shelf like one of those little Russian dolls, hollow. You know those...
Richie's
and you
crying.
open it, and then there's another one inside. Only there's nothing there. And then you open the next one, and the next one, and the next one, and
The next one.
next thing you know, you're 53 years old, and you're holding this tiny little doll. And you look at it, and it ain't much, but you think, maybe inside there's a dime.
He's wiping the tear from Richie's
And
eye.
he does like a face-off type.
Finger waterfall?
Yeah.
Come on, let me buy you a hot dog, huh?
Nothing washes down a
And
Russian
so,
doll like hot
in this
dogs.
clip, after Joe says, let me buy a hot dog or something, Joe gets like choked up and he wipes tears from his own eyes.
Yep.
Like, what? He's tricked himself into crying, or like...
That's why he's a good con man.
I guess so. He's really...
You used to gotta
he's
sell the
deep into
act.
the con.
But do you think is he really like reflecting on himself now that he's in this scenario?
Well, that's the other thing. Like this is clearly a man with a disappointing life.
Yeah, yeah.
Which, that whole analogy, which I can only imagine the writer who did it was like so pleased with himself when he put that down. That could, if you just like told some kid who's looking up to you that your wife is a failure, that sounds like an emotional moment.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So at this point, we find out that Duncan really distrusts Jack. He does not, for some reason, it's not really known. He just thinks it's all, I guess, too convenient.
Yeah, he thinks it's too easy. Like, oh, he looks for his dad, and his dad shows up right away.
Yeah.
Which, also, it's not. That's why we had the whole montage, right? Like he had to come up with the whole scheme on how to find Stubby, who had to lead him to the person. Like, I guess it really wasn't all that easy.
Yeah, he didn't put like an ad in the paper, like,
Right.
be my dad.
Well, it's almost like, in a way, it's like Duncan mistrusts this guy, and it turns out he's right. Not to spoil anything.
Spoiler
but it's
alert.
Like, yeah. So I don't know. It's like the character, he's just right.
Yeah,
always.
There's a lot of that in this show. Like, Duncan has all this wisdom and is just kind of right, and everyone else is like wrong all the time. Like, I think like he just has like they never set it up, I think, good enough. I think it's just like Duncan is wise and old, so he knows better.
Well, I do think there is something potentially compelling about that if they sell it properly. That like 400 years of horse sense actually counts for a lot.
Yeah.
But it does leave certain things feeling unearned. Like they're just able to reach into Duncan's brain to get answers. Just like his instincts are correct, and that's that.
Yeah. So at this point, since Duncan distrusts Joe, he breaks into his apartment, which is really like, as for Duncan to be like a pretty stand-up guy and always trying to do the right thing, like he broke into a dude's apartment.
He's like, hey, maybe
and
I'll,
then waits there for him. Like it's very threatening. So Joe and Richie show up, and Duncan's just there, and he's just like, "Oh, I'm here."
He says, "I hope you don't mind. I let myself in."
Yeah, which is nuts.
Which is a felony.
And then he's a huge dick to Joe. Like, he does not give Joe the benefit of the doubt at all. Like, he sits on a chair backwards. Like, he straddles the chair and he's like, yeah, I want to hear some of those stories. Like, what bullshit have you spun? And Richie's obviously pretty put off by this.
Yeah, well, he should be, because like he's just kind of being a dick. Like,
Yeah.
he's got a legitimate chance here to kind of expose this, and I think, like, a few well-placed questions, he might have been able to just blow up the story, and the episode's over.
Sure.
You know, but instead he's just, like, passive-aggressive.
Yeah, yeah.
And
He's
that's the
not,
whole
like,
thing.
being direct at all. He's
Yeah.
basically threatening the dad,
Yeah.
like, our Joe.
Yeah, and speaking of threatening, so the next couple scenes, so Joe ends up wanting to stay at the antique shop because he's getting kicked out of his apartment, but of course, really, it's a ruse because he wants to lift antiques from the place.
Right, well, when does Duncan first meet Clinch? Does that happen when he's waiting for Joe?
That's right, we
Yeah.
kind of missed that.
Yeah,
So, yeah, when
Clinch.
he's waiting in the apartment for Joe, Clinch shows up,
Yep.
and they have super weird dialogue because Clinch is all like, he's like, "Oh, who are you?" And he's like, "I'm his financial advisor."
Yeah.
It's so ridiculous.
Which doesn't he also just like go straight for a kick to try to kick the guy, or is that late? Oh, that's what later when he visits.
Yeah.
I'm skipping ahead, but yeah, that entire scene is crazy.
So Joe wants to stay at the antique shop. Tess has got to ask Duncan, of course, for permission. And then Duncan is still trying to find out more about Joe. So he tracks down Clinch at this like seedy bar. And then there's like a crazy karate scene because
Yep.
everyone knows Clinch is
Yep.
again a karate guy. I guess, I don't know.
Yeah, and like there's no setup for like why they're gonna fight. Like the goon just goes straight to try to kick him.
Yeah,
Like,
and then the one guy goes for his gun, and Duncan's like, "You go for your gun, I'll make you eat it." And it's like
Right.
Duncan, the stand-up moral guy who has broken into some poor schlub's apartment,
Yep.
as far as he knows, is now going to put a gun in someone's mouth.
And I'm like, was that supposed to be like a callback to when Clinch said he'd make Joe eat his fingers?
I don't know.
Because he wasn't there, so that doesn't make sense.
well, I don't think he's being literal.
I guess not. But in my head, I think this guy's going to some real extremes. Like, Duncan is off the deep end at this point.
Also in this
He's
scene,
gone rogue.
he does like a flip or something, and somebody asks him, "Where did you learn that?" And he says,
That's right.
"From the people who invented it." So I'm like, can you be less specific? Like,
All I'm thinking is if, like, you as the audience didn't know you're talking about a 400-year-old man, I would just assume he was being super racist.
yeah,
Like, he was just saying, like, yeah, I just learned it from some Asian. Like, yeah, not cool, Duncan.
So Duncan and Tess end up having like a fight, an argument about like letting Joe stay there. And she's like, well, for a 400, like she thinks Duncan's being really, really stubborn about this whole thing. And again, because Duncan is not really basing it on anything. It's just him being like, I just have a feeling. So she's like, oh, for a 400-year-old, you're really like stubborn. So they end up letting Joe stay overnight. And of course, Joe ends up stealing like this bizarrely ugly mask. Like,
Yeah, it
it is
doesn't
like a
even look
mask
like a
that they put
mask.
under like a roller. Like it's
Yeah.
like it looks like Krang from like
Yeah,
from Teenage
yeah,
Mutant
it
Ninja Turtles.
does.
Like just this like weird like Aztec putty face guy. So he steals this mask that's worth, I forget. Does Richie say what it's worth? It's worth like more than anything in the whole shop.
Like, I think they imply later that it's worth 6 times what he owes, right?
Yeah.
Or 5 times what he owes.
So it's a
worth,
lot of
like,
money.
$250,000 to $300,000.
There we go. So then we get another flashback and we find out who Duncan is. Like when Duncan does discover. I guess that's maybe part of the theme. It's like, be careful what you are looking for. They have that conversation earlier at dinner. It's like, well, what do you expect to find? Like maybe you're not going to like it. And so Duncan wants to know where he comes from. And he ends up finding out. And it's obviously not great. I don't know if we want to listen to it or just talk about...
Well, we already played the best part.
Yeah, the best part
Yeah.
is, where do I come from? So he ends up seeing his father on the road, like years later. This is back in 1622. And it turns out that Duncan is like a foundling. His father's wife had a stillborn child. And the like chambermaid took out that child and brought in this foundling. But she thought it was like marked with the devil, like she was frightened of it. So his father banished the chambermaid from the village, and because he was like, I saw something in you, like you were my heir, and he kept him around. So the whole thing is like, you're not even really my son, and it's like super emotional. So Duncan doesn't really even know where he came from.
So, from this scene, one of the things I was kind of wondering, because now we don't really know that this is maybe taking this too far, but at this point we don't even know whether or not Duncan's been born, right? Because at this point we've got two immortals. Duncan here, you don't know where he was born, and the chambermaid even says like he's like a changeling, which is like, I'm pretty sure in myths that's like fairies like steal children and swap them out with
Right.
like these spirits. So like, is there supposed to be this implication here that maybe immortals aren't actually born, like they come from elsewhere?
Absolutely. There's this implication. So in the movie, that Connor has the same backstory. He's also a foundling. And as we get further into the series, and we won't talk about some other characters yet, but they're not the only ones. So it's not mentioned a lot, but that's, I think, part of the Highlander mythology is that these immortals are not born. They're like somehow placed here by something or whatever. Like it's again, it's magic or something.
Is it a kind of magic?
Haha. But yeah, I mean, it also kind of is not that important. It's just kind of a fun thing. But yeah,
Sure.
somehow they appear. Yeah, so maybe all immortals are foundlings or orphans or something. So Richie goes out looking for Joe.
I'd like to point this out. When Richie goes out looking for Joe, Tessa and Duncan are like talking about it, and Duncan's like, "Oh, maybe I'll go help Richie," and Tessa's like, "Can't that wait till morning? Let's have sex now." So Duncan's like, "Okay," so he lets Richie like look for his dad all night. I just thought that was interesting.
Yeah.
Priority.
I guess they needed something for Tessa to do.
They needed a little something for the ladies.
Yeah.
Sure.
Also, even though I've watched this a bunch of times, am I calling her Tess or Tessa? What is it?
I have Tessa.
It's Tessa.
Tessa.
I guess
right?
sometimes shortened to Tess.
Or they call
Yeah.
her Tess sometimes.
So Joe decides he's just going to bail with the mask and just head to the airport and make money somewhere. He's just going to find a new place. But I guess we do find out that Joe has like a conscience.
Yeah.
Which I guess is hinted at earlier. Maybe that crying was real. And he ends up saving Richie, who's like captured by, what's his name? Clinch?
Clinch, yeah.
Because I guess Clinch thinks Richie and Joe are like in cahoots together.
Yeah, Joe earlier says that Richie, he tells Clinch that Richie has the money to give to Gustafsson.
Right, that's where he's going to get it from.
Yeah. So then Clinch finds Richie and brings him back to the casino to try to get info or money out of him.
Right, which we haven't even talked about the woman who runs this casino, right?
Yeah.
And her
Oh, yeah.
goofy, like, back and forth
Yep.
Clinch.
Like Gustafsson's her name, I think.
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
And it just seems like it's her and Clinch and then some random goons. Like, so this operation's kind of weird.
It's a minimal operation.
Yeah.
Yeah, and her outfits are very late 80s.
Yeah, lots of gold. She has like big poofy hair.
Yeah,
too, right?
big perm, big padded shoulders, all that sort of stuff. So anyway, they end up capturing, I guess, Joe too. But then Duncan just shows up and saves the day because
Yep.
he's Duncan and just kicks everybody's ass.
Yeah.
And that's kind of it.
But this episode feels like it ends very fast.
It does. There's like that climax, and then Richie has discovers where those checks are from. I forget how.
Right.
He goes back and talks to Stubbs, who's like, "Oh, those checks I was cashing for you were like from the foster agency or something like
Right.
that, right?" So it's like if Richie just asked one more question, this episode wouldn't have happened.
Right.
Yeah, which then they also reveal that. So you still don't know whether or not Joe is Jack Ryan.
Right.
No, we don't know
Right.
if that's really his dad or not.
But the answer's irrelevant because it's not his real dad regardless.
Right.
Because he was a foster child. But then, is it just a coincidence that he is also named Ryan and he happened to be placed with Ryan's? Like, I don't know much about
Or is that
foster-
why he was named Ryan?
Yeah.
Like, did he have no name?
Maybe. It's like, I was just not aware it was a convention that, like, when you're placed with a foster family, you take their name.
I think
Right.
you probably do. Right? I don't know.
I don't know how that works.
Yeah.
I
me
assume
neither.
that, like, what was the name on his birth certificate?
If you know
if
out
they had a
there
birth
in
certificate.
internet land, write in.
Yep. Tell us how this works. If any
Yeah.
of you are orphans.
If you're an orphan.
This is
Oh,
getting
boy.
insensitive. So.
I'm sorry. So anyway, so Richie doesn't know where he's from, and that's kind of like the theme. It's like you can decide who you are. And the ending of this episode is really, I thought, comical. I wrote down, so Richie is in McLeod's T-Bird, which ends up becoming kind of an iconic car, I think, in this show. Like, McLeod drives this vintage T-Bird, and it's awesome. So Richie's like revving it up, and like Duncan's like, "Hey, what are you doing? Like, that's too much," and he tunes it back down. So then Richie is just, he's playing grown up. Like, he is pretending to drive this car in a garage. He giggles as he's like turning the wheel, and then just the credits roll.
Wow. There's one line I wanted to bring up just so nobody misses it. When Duncan leaves from being mean to Richie and Joe the first time, Richie runs after him and says, "You treated my dad like he was rat poison." You didn't, not like you treated him like a rat. You treated him like he was rat poison.
You treated him like he was very useful for a specific purpose.
Yeah.
So it's like, do you need to poison some rats? Yes,
Yeah.
I'm very gentle
There you
with
go.
rat poison.
That was fun.
Awesome. So, any final thoughts on this episode? I know I have one big one. I'll go last.
It was kind of wacky and weird. I mean, it steps away from all the immortal stuff except for the Duncan flashback stuff, and that's kind of not really what I watch Highlander for.
I dug this episode mostly because of the connection with Duncan and seeing like that, the whole "where do I come from" origin story, and them both struggling with it. I think that's pretty strong, all things considered. And it was just kind of fun. Like, so much of this stuff is just, like, wacky. And, like, Quinch is just such a, like, keeps the train rolling of, like, these over-the-top, like, completely insane villains. That, like, I don't know, it put a smile on my face a couple times. I think that the Duncan origin stuff is great. I'd say this is a pretty okay episode, even if most of what happens in the present doesn't really advance the ball.
Yeah, it's an odd second episode. I sometimes think, I wonder if they were, like, really trying to be, like, this show's not just about immortals fighting each other. Like, it's also about these characters. And, like, if they wanted to really make a departure for the second episode. And again, I'm not sure if this was ever intended to be the second episode. The production number says it's, like, should be the fourth one. So if anyone out there knows what this was intended to be, maybe it was supposed to air a little later, but they decided to air it earlier. It's not my favorite episode by far. But I do like all the Duncan stuff is really, I think, pretty great. The stuff with Richie is a little, like, just kind of falls flat. However, the big thing I wanted to, like, blow the lid off of this, I have a theory about this episode. Oh. So Richie Ryan says that he always imagined that his dad was, like, maybe a secret agent or something. His dad's name was Jack Ryan. Tom Clancy's Jack Ryan. So, two things. Either is this a nod to like a little joke by the writers, or my theory is Richie doesn't have a dad because his dad is Jack Ryan. These worlds are connected.
That would be amazing.
It's Clear and Present Danger, it's Hunt for Red October, and Highlander all together. And so Richie's dad is actually Jack Ryan from the Tom Clancy books.
Yeah.
Suggest that that's untrue.
Okay. I will immediately admit probably not.
I think it's true. I think Harrison Ford, Sean Connery, and Richie should get together and make a movie.
There you go. So yeah, I don't know if there's any sort of behind the scenes sort of stuff. The Watcher Chronicles. This is a weird thing. They specify how Duncan dies in 1622, and the McLeods were having a feud with the neighboring clan, the Campbells. The Campbells stole a bunch of cows during the McLeod Fall Festival, so the McLeods like go to battle with them. So Duncan dies because they're fighting over like cows. I mean, I guess that's important for a small village of people to lose their cows, but it doesn't seem. It seems so like not grandiose. It's like, oh, that's why he died. Like, there was a scuffle at the Fall Fest. Like,
it's not like a Braveheart type situation. Or anything.
All right, so that wraps up this episode of Highlander Rewatched, Family Tree. Thanks a lot for listening. Make sure to follow us on Facebook and get involved. If you have any questions or comments or things you want to point out, leave us a message on Facebook or on Twitter. We're at Highlander Rewatched. You can also send us an email, which is probably the best way to contribute your comments, and that's highlanderrewatched@gmail.com. You can rate us on iTunes, and tell your friends about us. This is a great way to get into this great series. So you can follow me at Dr. Hotdog MD on Twitter if you're interested in food pictures and stuff. That's mostly what I do. Eamon is a great artist. What's your deal, Eamon?
You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram at EamonBDoc, and I do comics and cartoons you can check out on there.
Awesome.
Does that include cool Highlander stuff?
It does and will.
Awesome. Everyone, thanks for listening. Join us next week for the 3rd episode of Highlander Rewatched. Thanks. Bye.